Oh, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am setting up. Okay, it's good to see you guys. I have a very busy show. It's been a while since I've been on live. I have been busy trying to feel better, but also get gardens ready and do a bunch of stuff. But we have a lot to jump into. I'm going to tell you what we're going to start to talk about. We're going to talk about Earth.
Sam
Oh,
Mitchell
shit.
WhatsApp. Where's Sam Mitchell?
Why is my phone ringing? We're going to talk about Earth Day. And people were saying, well, didn't Nixon start Earth Day? So we'll clarify a little bit of that. And we're going to go through a bit of the bizarro world that we're living in. You'll see. You'll see. And then after the news, I do have a video. So this is going to be a pretty packed show. Then I'm going to come in with a home run, man. We are going to we're going to the movies, to the theater of your mind. And I'm going to read to you a piece that's going to blow your mind and scare you and the whole thing. It's good. So, happy Earth Day. And this Earth Day, well, I don't know, guys. I think Earth Day is kind of a failure in the United States. Uh, Kim, thank you for moderating. Looney Tunes, thank you for moderating. Good evening, everybody. B and Philip and all of you. Thanks for being with me. Earth Day. So, after witnessing a massive oil spill in Santa Barbara in 1969, Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson began hatching the idea for what would become known as the world's first Earth Day. The Earth Day, it was celebrated April 22nd, 1970. And it's estimated that over 20 million, which is a lot of people then, 10% of the country's population at the time took to the streets, literally, to protest and demonstrate against the impacts of 150 years of industrial development. That was some powerful movement, and many Americans were united, which we don't remember what that was like if you ever were living when that was happening. Unfortunately, Earth Day's mission to broaden and educate and activate the environmental movement worldwide, well, it's largely failed. 55 years later, in the United States of America, sitting president is a vehement climate change denier. Rather than heed the warnings of the world's smartest climate scientists about the inevitable effects of a warming planet, he believes in falsehoods that make him comfortable, a practice repeated by millions of Americans across social media and real life interactions. Our planet is struggling. But folks who seek to deny climate change and spread anti environmentalism rhetoric for personal or monetary gain are winning. It's undeniable. They are winning. That's hard. So, be that as it may, I do want to talk about the dude that started Earth Day. And I am changing windows. Okay, we're going over here. Just going to first talk about Nixon, Richard Nixon, because Nixon, he was the president. Yeah, it was difficult for him. He had a lot of pressure. He wasn't, Mr. Environmentalism and all that, but I'll just give you there's an article here. All of the stuff is in the show notes. I want to just read one paragraph, which was perhaps even more jarring to our modern political expectations. Nixon's support for Earth Day and for the planet was not iconoclastic among Republicans. While the original congressional resolution to create Earth Day came from Wisconsin Democrat Gaylord Nelson, the resolution was co-sponsored by California Republican Pete McCloskey. The 1968 Republican platform called for an expansion of urban green spaces and of our natural parks, declaring that our nation must pursue its activities in harmony with the environment. We must be mindful of our priceless heritage of natural beauty. And where are we now? Where are we now? My gosh. Well, this is the guy, and his name is Gaylord Nelson. He was the founder. He's the founder of Earth Day. Hello, Wanda. Hello, Philip. Yeah, and he did it. He was thinking in 1969. It's a pretty cool story, actually. Mm. I'm thirsty. God damn. Thirsty. And I got a long one to read. I might have to get up and go get another drink of at least some fresh water. This guy, he had an idea for a national teach-in on the environment to send a message to Washington that public opinion was solidly behind a bold political agenda on environmental problems. So this is how it happened. It was grassroots and tracing Earth Day's origins from him, and then there was the first Earth Day, and Earth Day has a living tradition, and this is the guy, Gaylord. He had an early life and he was progressive. And from Wisconsin to Washington, he was reviving the Democrats. Can we bring him back from the dead? We need to revive the Democrats right now. Gee, Gaylord, let's summons Gaylord. Yes, we need you, dude. The conservation governor, refining environmentalism and pushing forward a relentless environmental advocate. So he was pretty good. He was a pretty good guy. Yeah. And the first one, the grassroots. The size of events ranged from small high school assemblies to the 100,000 participants who created a human jam on New York's Fifth Avenue and flocked to open air carnival in the city's Union Square. And that's what's happening with Hands Off and all these movements. I see them growing. I see it's growing. It's happening. But this was a one day a year. But we, what we're living through is bizarro world, insanity. It's craziness. And you'll see why. You'll see. Tens of thousands congregated. And then so each Earth Day event nationwide was some combination of festival, political, and academic discussions, outlandish theatrics in a coalition building, because people felt good. They had hope. They didn't know everything was as fucked as it is now. Sorry, but it's true. I mean, things are definitely not when Gaylord had the vision. And yet he lived through World War II. He lived through a time when it was industrial and it was dirty and gross, and maybe there wasn't a lot of hope then. I don't know. But when you then go from Gaylord Nelson, a wonderful, amazing kind of guy, right? And you look at what happened today. It's like White House Earth Day message praises Trump as the president who finally follows science. Are you kidding me? Okay. Well, I think that this is the first flush. It has to be. This guy finally follows science. It is the gaslight of all time. Goodbye. Yep. All right. They actually touted the rollback on climate protections as a boon for the environment. Now, are you convinced that we are totally irrevocably screwed? I mean, these people have totally gaslit and manipulated science, everything in climate science, everything environmentally. They have completely bamboozled and lied, and they are denying it. It's insane. They're turning it around. How can you do this? He says, An Earth Day message from the White House praises Donald Trump, a man who once claimed climate change was a hoax by the Chinese, as the long awaited president who follows science. Are you fucking kidding me? The press release sent out Tuesday titled On Earth Day, we finally have a president who follows science, lists an assortment of actions that he's taken that the White House claims are actually good for the environment, despite every major conservation group saying the opposite. Oh, I mean, come on. So, by pausing restrictive emissions rules for coal plants, Trump has accelerated responsible energy and infrastructure projects, the release says. But are we living in the onion? We are living in the onion. By clamping down on wind energy, Trump is recognizing wind turbines detrimental to environmental impact on wildlife, which outweighs their benefits, the release says, pushing the myth that wind turbines have any significant impact on bird populations. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I don't actually know the science on it. President Trump is protecting public lands. Now, that's a good one. The release states, before explaining he's prioritized access to federal lands for energy development, something conservationists have said is an environmental nightmare. On his first day in office, he signed a litany of executive orders. Now, I want to go over here before I go the rest of that, because this is another article, Freedom from Religion Foundation, and talk about he desecrates Earth Days, but I wanted to read their list because their list is pretty good. The list of his environmental sins is egregious. In 1 week in March, announced it's firing an additional 1,000 employees of the NOAA, which I think, Meg, there's a lot of hemming and hawing right now about that. Zach Lape got his job back, so we don't know exactly what's happening. It's very very careless and thoughtless. Absolutely no empathy in this administration for anybody, for human beings behind all this shit. Okay. Pledge to reverse the Biden administration's focus on climate change because, as Energy Secretary Chris Wright put it, that's a very poor direction in energy policy. Canceled $20 billion in climate grants going to 8 nonprofits through the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Said all Environmental Protection Agency offices would be eliminated. Suspended 20 legal opinions that included protection for wild birds. And then signing several executive orders to revive the country's coal industry. That's just fabulous. Slashing funding and staff for the National Climate Assessment, which we go over every year, which the federal government produces, well, every 4 years, to analyze the effects of rising temperatures on human health, agriculture, energy production. That's 4 years. There's another one we go through. Every country has a good climate report. Think about it. True. Potsdam has one. They have the planetary boundaries material that they are working on there. Moving to end Environmental Protection Agency requirements that big polluters must disclose how much carbon dioxide and other planet warming gases they emit, and cutting 84% of staff that funds recovery from disasters as part of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. God, jeez. I can't even go through that. I'm going back just to the absurdity and the lunacy. We are run by lunatics. They really are. They are, I would say, psychopathic lunatics. The oligarchies are in the United States. I mean, Earth Day is just, it's a joke. There's no Earth Day. No. They want to, what is it? Oh, here, this is lovely. They speed up, the energy emergency to speed up the fossil fuels, permitting, nuclear power and mining, halting offshore, everything. Just let's open up Alaska's Tongass National Forest. When I read this stuff and I see what is happening, it is, yeah, Alex. Where's Alex? I see it. He's got it. You took the words right out of my mouth. I've got to find them. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is exactly right where we are. This is the science back in the White House, President. I mean, seriously, it's insane. All right, now nuclear power. Remember nuclear power, because pretty soon we are going to be reading a story about nuclear power and climate collapse. And that's going to be where you need your warm drink or your cup of tea or your cup of coffee and your blanket, and you're going to get comfortable for me reading this because it's good. But we got to do the news first. So we have now that wonderful president who is bringing science back in to the White House. Yep, president who finally follows science. Maybe that has to have 2 flushes. I can't stand it. Bye. Okay. However, there were protests today, and they were all over the place, so that was good. I didn't go to anything today because I was working on this show, and outside and inside. So they were today specifically against Trump administration's climate policies and climate change science rollbacks, which brings me to this little clip. I've got to. This is a little clip, but I do have a pretty good intermission. But we're gonna do this first, because this is partly where the bizarro world is coming from, and you know it. Follow me.
Climate change allegedly is everywhere. And if the American people elect a conservative president, his administration will have to eradicate climate change references from absolutely everywhere. And according to our intelligence community, the #1 threat facing our country today is, drumroll, climate change. Not Russia, not China, not AI, climate change. This shows how the federal government is all in on this issue. And climate change activists wield a lot of power. This is an issue to pay attention to, as it has infiltrated every part of the federal government. Now, when I think of climate change, I immediately think of population control, don't you? I think about the people who don't want you to have children because of the impact on the environment. Perhaps not everyone will make that connection, but after spending time in the international space trying to protect life, I can tell you that this is part of their ultimate goal, to control people.
Yeah, we are living in a different, nothing I ever thought would happen in my lifetime. And I'm older. I really feel for everybody younger, but yet when you're younger, the younger you are, the less you know about what you missed or didn't miss, I guess. It's pretty awful. I think it is. That's the Project 2025 training. That was the climate, she's like a robot almost, in a sense. So now I'm going to move on. We saw the protests, and of course, I'm not reading all this because I have a film I made for you guys, and it's a newsy one. So this one is E&E News, which is, they didn't used to be owned by Politico, but I guess Politico has money, and E&E was losing money because they were nonprofit. They were like the business they cater to business. And if you look at the bottom of E&E, you see they've got Energy Wire, Climate Wire, E&E Daily, Green Wire, and E&E. I could never afford to have it. So now that they are with Politico, they have more free content. So hits delete for energy and environmental regs. This was from April 10th. And it's more of the same. I'm sure we've heard of it. I don't know. But showerhead regulations, sunsetting, anti-competitive regulations, everything. They just want to say, forget it. We don't want anything you can do. It is a free for all for businesses to exploit and mine and drill and frack and actually pollute up the planet with chemical companies that are getting exemptions, so there could be another love canal. Nobody will ever know until it happens. I mean, we're going backwards. They like the I think I heard Orange Turd likes the late 1800s to 1913. That those are the year that everything was tariffs and there was no income tax, because there were no rules or regulations and they could abuse people. It's really insane. And they have everybody believing now that everything's fine. Everything's just fine. And they are going backwards and backwards and backwards. And this will be in the show notes. I just wanted to show you them. And then this freak. This is a freak. This is exactly what I was just talking about, how the industrial polluters will be able to spew and belch and whatever they do in different neighborhoods. Because, you see, the Clean Air Act enables the president to temporarily exempt industrial sites from new rules if the technology required to meet them is not widely available and if the continued activity is in the interest of national security. So there you go. Everything now is going to not be able to have that right technology, or it's all going to be national security. Mark my words, they will mangle everything and turn it all around, but the chemical companies, they will win. Unfortunately, they will win. So who is in the mood for a nice newsy video? Let me see what you guys are doing. I would like to play this video for you that I made. But really, everybody, I see you're all chit-chatting out there, and that's good. Yes, and children worked and died in factories. They're already repealing childhood laws because they don't. This is all happening, and we are witnessing the most insane time. I'm sorry. It's so hard for me to be upbeat and say, "Oh, I want to sing Kumbaya for Earth Day," when everything is just so fucking fantastic. Oh my. Oh my. I need to sit back. Hi, Poppy. It's good to see all of you. Let's sit back and watch my movie. I'll set it up. It's really, yeah, to the point. A lot of news, a lot of information, a lot of news, a lot of information like usual. And then I can sit back and we can relax. And then later I am definitely going to read from Sarah Connor, Collapse 2050, and you're going to love it. Definitely going to love it.
Our goal is a decent environment in its broadest and deepest sense. And winning the environmental war is a whole lot tougher challenge by far than any other challenge ever to confront mankind. The battle to restore a proper relationship between man and his environment, between man and other living creatures, will require a long, sustained political, moral, ethical, and financial commitment far beyond any commitment ever made by any society in the history of man. Are we able? Yes. Are we willing? That's the unanswered question.
We want the cleanest air. We want crystal clean water.
I would say that it's comical if his policies weren't so dangerous. I've often said that his policies, both around air pollution and water pollution, should actually come with a label, almost like cigarettes, that says that this policy is dangerous for your health.
Our atmosphere now contains concentrations of carbon dioxide that have not been equaled for millions of years.
We can protect the environment and grow the economy. Working with Doge and Elon Musk, we've now canceled $22 billion worth of grants, and we have launched what is the largest deregulatory action in the history of the country.
On Wednesday night, President Donald Trump issued an executive order directing various energy and environmental regulatory agencies to phase out a broad range of environmental protections. Agencies such as the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, and the Fish and Wildlife Service have been instructed to amend their regulations so that they expire by October 2026. This order affects regulations under laws concerning energy appliance standards, mining and offshore drilling, as well as those under the Endangered Species Act.
2024 was the hottest year on record, capping a decade where almost every year broke the previous year's record high. Carbon emissions, which help drive that warming, are also at record levels. President Trump and his administration argue that this is not a problem and that trying to address it only hurts the economy and puts the U.S. at a competitive disadvantage. On his first day in office, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Accord. He's tried to freeze billions in funding for clean energy projects, wants to boost coal production, and declared a, quote, national energy emergency to increase domestic fossil fuels. While Trump's actions face legal challenges, environmentalists are sounding the alarm.
Less than 24 hours after President Trump issued an executive order to increase mining across the country.
This is where Twin Metals wants to develop its mine.
Ingrid Lyons is fearing the worst.
This is an attack on all public lands in America. They belong in public hands. And fundamentally, this executive order is taking them out of public hands. They are giving them to corporate interests.
The president's order seeks to up mining of uranium, gold, and copper, cutting back regulations and paving a fast track to have new projects identified in a month's time, effectively undoing a 20-year protection in the boundary waters signed during the Biden administration. Lyons says her Save the Boundary Waters organization is already planning to fight any projects in court.
This area has been studied so deeply around its potential for copper mining, and the results are always unequivocal. They're always, this is just the wrong ecosystem, the wrong landscape for this type of mining.
Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security. Obviously, we're aware of occurrences within the environment and how they may impact operations, but we're focused on the direct threats to Americans' safety, well-being, and security. We gave direction to our team at ODNI to focus on the most extreme and critical national security threats that we face.
Your direction include no comments on climate change?
Senator, as I said, I focused on the most extreme and direct national security threats.
That's not a response to my question.
That we face.
Did you instruct that there be no finding in terms of climate change in this report?
I don't recall giving that instruction.
We're going to save over $1 trillion.
President Trump has issued a flurry of executive orders designed to cut back on U.S. environmental protection, to try to cut back on the growth of renewable energy, and to try to drill, baby, drill.
The next item here is the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Treaty.
The Paris Climate Agreement did not impose on the U.S. or any country any particular obligations that it didn't take on itself. So each country came up with its voluntary pledges. Trump now, as he did before, is withdrawing from the negotiations. It means that the dominant player going forward will be China.
So several of his executive orders will have the effect of at least trying to incentivize more production of oil and gas. And the reason I say trying is it's important to note that the United States right now is the largest producer of oil of any nation in history.
It's hard to imagine what kind of national energy emergency we're in. The only justification that he put forth in the executive order was because of price. Now, the price of energy is now not historically high, and none of the actions that he's talking about taking will actually reduce the price of energy. Actually, some of them will increase the price of energy because wind, which is one of his particular targets, is an inexpensive way of producing energy. And if he's trying to stop development of wind, that's going to hurt rather than help the price of energy. The executive orders call for speeding up and in some cases bypassing the restrictions of the Endangered Species Act and allowing oil drilling for the first time in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is a very important wildlife habitat that's been protected for decades.
Another one of the executive orders revoked incentives for electric vehicles. This is going to have to be detrimental in the long term because it signals a shift in policy, and of course automakers have been building out their plans based on a policy environment. So it can't be good. Whether it's disastrous remains to be seen.
It's long been established that low-income and minority communities are more seriously affected by all kinds of pollution and other environmental hazards. And so for decades, we've had a set of programs to try to redress this environmental injustice. Trump has wiped all of that out. And that means that these environmental injustices will continue and might become more severe.
Okay. So you got the news and you got some dramatic music and yeah. Okay. We're going to move on. I hope you liked that. I hope you learned. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. I covered a lot in there. And sometimes it's better to make a movie of it. Hi, Mark. So, okay, we're going to move on to some more of this just amazing news that's just making us all so happy to be living in the United States at this time of history. Elon Musk's Doge is now running America's national parks. Aren't we so thrilled? Yay! Okay, we got the parks. They're doged. They've been doged. And this Doug Burgum is a complete clueless moron. Secretary of, they're all sitting around like with this asshole. I can't stand the picture, but you look at them and you just know that they're disgusting. So Doge is now took over the Interior Department from Doug Burgum. We don't even know who's in this organization. We don't know who is running. This is truly the deep state. The deep state that they on the right always complain about. This is the deep state takeover, Project 2025. Last week, Doge took over the Interior Department. National Park Service Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and more. The Interior Department is supposed to oversee 400 national parks and historic sites, uphold treaty rights with over 500 recognized Native American tribes, manage more than 500 million acres of land, and the country's fish and wildlife. I mean, how screwed is this? He signed away significant control of the Interior Department. How fucked is this? I mean, it's just like a nightmare. In my opinion, I'm sorry, but this is a complete nightmare. I can't wait for the Canadian election to be over because somebody's got to be sane up there and they're going to take over in science and academics and meteorological services and studies. They are. Anyway, this is crazy. It is. This guy is, his name is Tyler Hassan. And that's it. Some guy we don't know. We didn't even know. We didn't run for anything. It directs him, Doge's Assistant Secretary of Policy Management and Budget, to make funding decisions, fire employees, and create policy, oversee programs, and transfer funds. We need a tax revolt. I don't want to pay for this. Do you? Keep people away from the parks. Just close them. The animals would be a lot happier. This fucker is a former oil executive, and he worked for Basin Energy, an oil field equipment company, before joining the Orange Turd mob. Broad powers to this guy. He doesn't have to report to Burgum or give Burgum veto power of any of his decisions, including the potential firing of thousands of public land managers or park rangers. According to reporting in the Washington Post, this guy is reviewing any of the grants and contracts. So pretty much, the United States is over, being taken over. Or am I right? It's over. It's over. And here's another one. So we learn about that, and Fix Our Forests. Here's another scam, okay? Another goddamn scam. This is the Fix Our Forests Act, which aims to open public land to massive logging projects under the guise of preventing wildfires. I don't even have to read it. It's pathetic. Unprecedented 10,000 acre categorical exclusions from NEPA and National Historic Preservation Act. I don't mean to upset you all, but, you know, I'm probably one of the only ones that talks about all of this consistently, these, you know, in a YouTube, because everybody talks about so many other issues. But these are slipping under the radar because so many people have no relationship with nature. And then the people that do are just, they're I don't know where they are. They're out in the street. They're part of the hands off. Inappropriately interfere with the power of federal courts to review projects, limiting litigants from seeking justice in court, and preventing courts from ordering the review required by law unless the proponents entirely failed to prepare an environmental document. I mean, it's just awful, all right? And I'm not even, everything will be in the show notes. I get so pissed. Sick. The logging. This is Columbia Insight, environmental news from the Pacific Northwest. Experts say Trump logging mandate would increase wildfire damage, which is what I said before. Forest Service says the best way to save forests is cut them down. Well, the courts agree. Just cut them down. There'll be nothing left. I didn't even have to put horrible pictures in because you see them. Not science and not legal. What they're doing. Clear-cutting patches of forested land alters the microclimates of the landscape, allowing more sunlight to reach the ground, amplifying brush growth and drying out soil, which creates even more dry fuel. Everything this administration does is wrong, backwards, half-assed, corrupt, colluded, ignorant, moronic, clueless, everything. There is not one area. I will keep here in my lane of climate environment. For the most part, it's hard. Not, it's hard to veer. I like to go out into different things, but this stuff is so critical. It's critical. But, we've got, they're saying, fuck all these things. Forget the Endangered Species Act. The asshole wants clean air and water. Okay. We know that because he gave it away. This is just another article. Former oil exec. It's gross. So we went through it. You now know that our national parks are in very serious trouble, as this said. Ernie, we can't have both. Your choice, the planet or 10 billion people. Sad news, Canada is also talking about putting people above the planet to rebuild the economy. Either one is going to be tough. But there's one person in Canada I would rather listen to as the head than the Orange Turd we have down here, who you just can't understand him. And he's so nasty and sickening and evil and mean and awful when he talks about anything. And he just put the science back in the White House. Yeah. And now we move to the bees really quickly, because that's just another thing. These people are the wonderful people that try to save. The intrepid team of bee lovers are doing everything they can. And this is about the United States Geological Survey Bee Lab. Now, are they in danger of losing their funding? Bee research. It's very, very important, because if you don't pollinate, can't grow food, right? So there's a wildlife biologist looking at the bees in Maryland. It looks like a nice place, but they're studying all these different bees. 3,600 different species of bees in the United States, more than in any other country in the world. While commercial farms rent truckloads of honeybees each spring to pollinate commercial crops, native bees are the unsung heroes maintaining our food supply, and I bring them all onto my place, to my garden. I love them. They pollinate some 75% of our plants, both cultivated and wild. Indeed, some plants, tomatoes, eggplants, kiwis, and blueberries, can only be pollinated by native bees. So let's hear it for the bees. We love the bees. We love the bees. Yes, we do. So that's a little positive about the wonderful people that, try. But native bees are in decline. There's always the downside, because everything's a downside. Pesticides, pathogens, and diseases are partly to blame, but it's habitat loss, the steady displacement of plants and open spaces by housing developments and highways, and cities, and shopping malls, and farms, flowerless lawns. Yep. We humans wouldn't starve if all the native bees disappeared, but our diets would be a lot more boring and a lot less nutritious. We'd be reduced to nuts, grains, and of course honey. Well, anyway, so there are 600 species formally assessed for risk of extinction. As for the remaining 3,000, we don't know. They don't know. Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. So there's people on the job. There's people that really give a shit. These are the people that are so completely opposite from Mar-a-Lago types. Complete opposites. These are the people that give of themselves, that are going to lose their funding. Now we can look at, money, climate money. Citibank blocked from allowing access to climate grant money. That's just another thing, they get in and all of these nice grants to do these projects and programs and things to, like Nicholas Humphrey always says, the things to help people. Well, they're taking that away. So Citibank is fighting, and the U.S. District Court of Columbia, they order enjoined Citibank from transferring or otherwise moving funds out of accounts established in connection with the grants Coalition for Green Capital, Climate United Fund, and Power Forward Communities. So we'll see what happens with the money and the NGO fights, the climate grants, the people working on programs. Probably, I hope not carbon capture. Then, I wanted to segue this one over to that one, but North America faces a sprawling pollinator crisis. We know. We know. A lot of them. And we saw that. There's a bunch of pictures, though. Let me see. Oh, these aren't the bees, though. This is an advertisement. I don't think we want to see that. What pollinators, the insects, birds, bats, and mammals that help move pollen from one place to another. And I really try very hard to make it happen here. I have a couple of pictures, actually. Or I don't know if they're over here. Let me see if they're here or are they on the other screen. Let me move to the other screen. Let's take a break before I read the last big one. Okay, let's look at a couple of pictures that I pulled up for you guys. How you doing out there? You doing good? All right, we're going to go back because I have a couple of more things to talk about. I got to cover everything before I read, which could be part 2. But grow milkweed. Oh, that grows all over where I am. I love it. I love it. You have passion flowers and butterflies. See, we still have some normalcy when we look outside for a little while. But man, we're going to read tonight. And it's going to be like going to the movies of your brain. Yes, it is. Okay, so let me show you a couple things here. Just so you know, that's what I look at when I stand at the end of my driveway across the street. I love her horses. She's a horse rescuer. I'm a cat rescuer. And today, the starlings are making their homes under my deck. And thank God they're not in my soffit anymore. Because they used to be in the soffit. I could hear them outside the hole, and that got patched. So there's been stuff going on around here, which is good stuff. And we could get a little depressed. Peter Glick. Atmospheric CO2 has passed 430 parts per million. The last time atmospheric CO2 was at 430 parts per million was during the ancient Pliocene era, 3 to 5 million years ago, and humans didn't exist. Now, how is that we are existing? How is it we are actually existing? Maybe I'll ask Paul Beckwith. He had to cancel. But he's supposed to be, I hope, May 2nd. And I have William Reese. What is William Reese? Dr. William Reese is coming on Dr. William Reese is going to be live with us on the 23rd of May. I wanted a little time, and he's going to be with us live, which is great because you can all write your questions for Dr. Reese. He doesn't usually do lives, so it's going to be pretty good. Our air and water are not polluters dumping grounds. Just some I liked from around today. You know, when my back hurts and I'm not as mobile as I've been, I'm on social media extremely way too much. So I save all these things I find and I like them. All right, guys, you deserve a break. Stop healing. Choose violence. Go batshit insane. Do it for the plot. I am not advocating violence. I just liked it. That was Piper's on Blue Sky. So let's see. Do I have any more? No, I thought that was a good one, though. This one. Yeah, you deserve a break. Stop healing. Choose violence. Go batshit insane. Do it for the plot. We might have to. God, we might have to. All right. I'm going back to the other page. I want to see, do I have any more videos? No. All right, I'm going back to the other window because I want to talk a couple of minutes about, before I go on to the story, I want to talk about, oh, are we heading towards World War III? Probably yes. That's it. Okay, I'm done with that. Tulsi Gabbard. I want to talk about Tulsi Gabbard. I included her in the video because Tulsi Gabbard wrote the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act. She is a chameleon, changed colors. What happened to her? Even back in 2020 when she was running for president, she had, here it is. The ideas Gabbard set out in the OFF Act included a charge to modernize electricity grids to help states set renewable energy standards like the 100% renewable energy standard goal set in 2015 Hawaii. She advocates for significant investments in renewable energy technology like energy storage and for loan guarantees for utility scale renewable energy projects. She sided with climate activists on most issues and has a 94% scorecard from the League of Conservation Voters. What the hell happened to her? She expressed, yeah, okay, Linda, where are you? I don't know that, but it just seems so horrible. Absolutely horrible. Horrible. She had support for the Green New Deal. She opted not to be a co-sponsor because it was vague. So she supported the zero emissions, but she does not support, and this is really important because the rest of the show is all a nuclear story. She does not support leaving the door open to nuclear power unless and until there's a permanent solution to waste. She supported a ban on fracking and ending fossil fuel. Do these idiots on the right know this is her? Did they even look into this? No one on Fox has ever mentioned this about her. Unreal. And, something we're not talking about is dealing with climate change, but it's one of the biggest contributors of climate to our environment, to our atmosphere, agriculture, and she's in the military. Did she ever say that? Okay, so she's talking all this, but now what is she? The National Security Advisor, and the National Security yearly report comes out, and climate change and the climate crisis is not in it as a threat to national security. Are you fucking kidding me? So this really gets to me about this person. It really does, because the OFF Act was something I was talking about years ago when she was sponsoring it. She really broke my heart in how she changed. Holy shit. It was called the No Fossil Fuel Funding Pledge, and I was all into that when the channel was young and before I knew that we were completely an irreversible predicament we cannot change. So it was crazy. She's had some LGBTQ problems and Islamic ideology that alienated her from progressive voters, which I don't know that much. Maybe that's where the right wing folded in on her, but it's just crazy to me, okay? It just really, really bugged me that about her. So now we're going to set up for, are you guys ready? It's going to be a longer show. But Gary, she was scary. Well, I read the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Futures Act back then, and it was a pretty decent piece of legislation if you were a green environmentalist, which I was more so than now. You know, I'm an environmentalist. I love the earth. Mm-hmm. Okay, we are going to... Do we have yeah, we don't have a good person here. Thank you, Kim. Get rid of the person. We don't want to wreck the equilibrium here. Okay, 2030 doomsday scenario. I'm putting on music for this. Everybody ready? Everybody ready? Okay. We've got This is Sarah, and she is the Collapse 2050 site. I've narrated her stuff before. So sit back. I am the night bird, and I am here to entertain you with some CliFi horror for the evening that could actually be our future. So here we go. 2030, doomsday scenario, the great nuclear collapse. A timeline of the endgame for human civilization. Get ready, guys. Humanity has constructed a doomsday dead man switch that threatens civilization. Climate destruction will make it increasingly difficult to avoid the looming global nuclear catastrophe we've created. So here's how our future might unravel. Now you tell me if the music's too loud, somebody, and I'll continue. By the late 2020s, Earth's climate is in unprecedented turmoil. Global average temperatures are consistently 1.5 above pre-industrial levels. Each year brings record-breaking heat waves, freak floods, and droughts that batter infrastructure. Coastal cities flood more frequently, roads buckle in extreme heat, and power grids strain under surging demand for cooking. I have to turn something on. Okay. Yes. For cooling. This cascade of climate disasters sets the stage for a systemic collapse as societies grapple with runaway warming, the resilience of critical infrastructure, power, water, transit erodes. Energy systems enter a crisis even before 2030. Nuclear power, which in 2025 still provided about 9% of the world's electricity from about 440 reactors, becomes increasingly unreliable. Many nuclear plants struggle with climate stresses. Cooling water sources heat up in the summer, forcing reactors to reduce output or shut down to avoid unsafe temperatures. For example, a 2028 European heat wave pushes river and sea temperatures above 25 C, triggering emergency shutdowns at multiple reactors that cannot be cooled effectively. At the same time, stronger storms and floods threaten reactor safety. Dozens of reactors worldwide are unprepared for extreme flooding, meaning a dam failure or a storm surge could lead to a Fukushima-scale accident. Worrisome reports emerge of power plants in floodplains and coasts where defenses are overtopped by rising seas and torrential rains. By 2029, global carbon output remains high and natural feedback loops are kicking in. In the Arctic, permafrost thaws and releases methane, creating a vicious warming cycle where initial warming triggers more emissions, leading to even more warming. Scientists caution that a tipping point is near, beyond which climate change becomes self-perpetuating, a true runaway scenario. Society approaches 2030 in a precarious state, aware of looming catastrophe, but unprepared for its speed. The stage is set for the coming collapse, with power grids and nuclear facilities, the backbone of the industrial world, already under severe strain. The early 2030s, blackouts, and the first reactor crisis. 2030 marks the breaking point, a confluence of climate catastrophes, collapses, power grids across multiple continents. A severe global heat wave in the summer of 2030 brings record electricity demand, while many power plants, nuclear and coal alike, are derated or offline due to overheating coolant water. Then powerful Category 5 storms strike in succession. One hurricane inundates the U.S. eastern seaboard, while an unprecedented typhoon swamps Southeast Asia. These disasters knock out transmission lines and flood key substations, leading to prolonged blackouts in dozens of major cities. Emergency systems are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed With communications down and transportation paralyzed, manpower shortages become acute. Many operators and engineers cannot reach their stations. Nuclear power plants are among the first to feel... Excuse me, I need a break. Okay, sorry. I thought I was going to sneeze. What a way to wreck the story. Okay. Nuclear power plants are among the first to feel the emergency. Grid failure triggers automatic reactor scrams, which are rapid shutdowns at plants from Florida to France. Control rods halt the fission reactions, but decay heat in reactor cores still needs cooling for days to prevent meltdown. Normally, backup diesel generators would power the cooling plants, the pumps, but the scale of the blackout means diesel resupply is uncertain, and some generators fail in flooded facilities. In a grim reflection of 2011's Fukushima disaster, several coastal reactors lose all power as storm surges drown their backup generators. Within hours to days, the first meltdowns occur. In 2031, a reactor in South Asia becomes a flashpoint. Its cooling pumps falter after the grid collapse, leading to the core overheat. The reactor's heart, it melts through containment in a matter of days, releasing a plume of radioactive steam and debris. Nearby, an even greater danger unfolds. The plant's spent fuel pool, packed with years of highly radioactive spent robs, boils dry without cooling. Exposed to air, the zirconium cladding of the fuel ignites, triggering a fire that belches long-lived radioisotopes directly into the atmosphere. This nightmare scenario, once narrowly avoided at Fukushima by heroic ad hoc measures, now plays out in full. Local and regional consequences are immediate and harrowing. Authorities already struggling with disaster response hastily order mass evacuations around stricken plants. In South Asia incident, a radius of 30 kilometers is declared a no-go zone as radiation levels spike. Over 1 million people are displaced in this region alone, fleeing what swiftly becomes a nuclear dead zone. Many received significant radiation doses during the chaotic evacuation, trapped by traffic jams under drifting fallout. Comparisons are made to Chernobyl's 1986 evacuation. There, 130,000 people were permanently resettled and a 1,000-square-mile exclusion zone established, but the 2031 event affects an even larger population in a densely settled area. That is in Russia. Nearby countries track the radioactive cloud as it crosses borders. Within days, radioactive iodine and cesium are detected in cities hundreds of kilometers downwind. Governments distribute iodine tablets to help block uptake of radioactive iodine in thyroid glands, recalling measures taken after Chernobyl and Fukushima. Farmers in downwind regions watch in despair as cesium-137 contaminates soil and crops, knowing from past accident that those lands may be unsafe for farming for decades. After Chernobyl, for instance, radiocesium lingering in soils kept pastures in part of Europe under restriction for over 20 years. Globally, these first reactor crises sent a chilling signal. Airborne radiation from the fires and vented steam reaches the upper atmosphere and begins circling the planet. Within weeks, trace amounts of cesium-137 and strontium-90 are found in faraway monitoring stations. While the initial fallout poses the greatest danger locally, the global dispersion of radionucleotides raises alarms. Public health experts warn that even low-dose fallout on crops could, when multiplied across the world, elevate cancer risks and contaminate food supplies. International markets are rocked as nations ban produce and grain imports from entire regions. The economic shock compounds the physical destruction. Already destabilized by climate disasters, the global supply chain further fractures under fear of radiation in goods. Perhaps most critical for what comes next, these early accidents erode the capacity to respond to future crises. Emergency workers who heroically battled the first meltdowns, hosing overheating reactors, attempting improvised cooling, have suffered radiation exposure or exhaustion. Large swaths of power grid remain offline, making rolling blackouts the new normal, even in areas not directly hit by the climate events. This energy shortage slows recovery efforts and undermines the cooling and monitoring systems at other nuclear sites. By 2032, the world faces a stark reality. Roughly 10% of nuclear reactors worldwide are in some stage of crisis, either already melted down or scrammed and struggling to keep their hot cores and spent fuel. What was once unthinkable now seems inevitable. Mid-2030s cascading meltdowns across the world. As 2035 approaches, the situation spirals into a cascade of nuclear calamities. Ongoing climate chaos keeps hammering human systems. Year after year, megastorms, wildfires, and heat waves pummel regions before they can recover. The compounded infrastructure damage means many areas have only intermittent electricity and scarce supplies. In this environment, about half the world's nuclear reactors are effectively left unattended or unserviceable, some due to direct disaster impacts, others because manpower and resources have been collapsed in the region. Governments in relatively stable areas attempt to initiate orderly shutdowns of reactors as a preventive measure, but even a shut reactor needs years of active cooling and oversight. In many cases, those best efforts falter. By 2033 to 35, a wave of reactor meltdowns unfolds on nearly every continent. Look at all of them. Right where we live. Right where I live. The numbers are staggering. What started with a few isolated accidents in 2032 explodes into dozens of sites in crisis. Older nuclear stations prove especially vulnerable, lacking passive cooling features. They succumb quickly when grid power and backups fail. Newer reactors touted as meltdown-proof also face unforeseen challenges. Coolant reservoir tanks run dry when maintenance crews vanish, or hydrogen explosions like those that blew apart Fukushima's reactor buildings occur due to unvented pressure. Spent fuel pool fires add to the nightmare at many sites. Analysts later estimate that these pool fires released even more radiation than the reactor core meltdowns in several cases, since pools often contain decades of fuel assemblies, holding up to 10 times the long-lived radioactivity of a reactor core in each pool. Each collapsing plant creates its own radiation footprint. By the mid-2030s, a patchwork of radioactive exclusion zones scars the northern hemisphere. In Eurasia, multiple zones from Western Europe through Russia, South Asia, and East Asia dot the map where reactors have failed. Some of these zones begin to overlap, forming a virtually continuous swath of contaminated land in parts of Europe and Asia. In Western Europe, for example, meltdowns at 2 French reactors and 1 German reactor in 2034 forced evacuations that cover large parts of the Rhine Valley. Later, a catastrophe at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia plant, already endangered for years prior, adds to the chain, rendering areas along the Dnieper River highly radioactive once again. North America is not spared. A meltdown at an aging Midwest U.S. plant sends radiation across several states, and Canada's Ontario reactors shut down due to power loss. They suffer a pool fire that spreads contaminations through the Great Lakes region. In total, roughly 50% of the world's 400-plus reactors are now either destroyed or abandoned. Humanity suddenly finds itself living with hundreds of Chernobyl-sized disasters at once. Local and regional consequences reach an apocalyptic scale. Hundreds of millions of people become actual or potential refugees from high-radiation areas. Major cities near failed plants are emptied. By 2035, regions like the French Riviera, the North China Plain, Ukraine and the U.S. eastern seaboard have pockets that resemble Pripyat, ghost cities left to wild animals. The contamination of land and water is immense. Isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90 settle into agricultural soils. Just as Chernobyl's fallout once contaminated 200,000 plus square kilometers of Europe to some degree, the 2030s meltdowns contaminate vast expanses of the globe. Agricultural experts estimate that a significant fraction of the world's breadbaskets are now tainted by radioactive fallout. For example, the Punjab region and the American Midwest both see cesium levels in soil far above safe farming limits, threatening global grain supplies. In many countries, the choice is stark: eat potentially contaminated food or starve. Livestock that graze on fallout-blanketed pastures accumulate radionucleotides in their meat and milk, as British sheep did for decades after Chernobyl. Governments impose strict bans on food exports from these zones, and global food prices skyrocket. Famine looms for countries that relied on imports from now irradiated farmlands. Beyond human habitations, ecosystems suffer radiological damage layered on top of climate stress. Forests, downwind of reactor accidents, turn brown and silent as foliage and wildlife absorb heavy doses of radiation. In some intensely contaminated zone, an eerie calm prevails, reminiscent of how the core area around Chernobyl became an accidental wildlife refuge, but one where many organisms die young or show mutations. Initially, high radiation kills or stunts many plants and animals. Forests die and animal populations plummet. Over the later 2030s, some wildlife returns to abandoned zones, benefiting from the lack of humans. However, in areas of very high contamination, biodiversity remains lower and animals show signs of chronic radiation exposure. The web of life is poisoned. Radioactive cesium and strontium work their way up the food chains, affecting predators and prey alike. Combined with the ongoing climate upheavals, heat stress, wildfires, habitat shifts, the added burden of radiation pushes many species to extinction in contaminated regions. Aquatic ecosystems are also hit. Radioactive runoff flows into rivers and seas, causing fish kills and long-term mutations in fish reproduction cycles. The global consequence of this mid-2030s nuclear cascade are profound. Atmospheric circulation transport radioactive pollution around the world. By 2035 to 36, background radiation levels have risen notably above the 2020 norms in both hemispheres. Radioactive particles from multiple meltdowns are detected in the Arctic and even the Antarctic, having been carried by air currents. Although concentrations far from the accident sites are low, no corner of the planet is truly untouched. In the northern hemisphere, intermittent waves of fallout descend whenever rain clouds scavenge particles from the upper atmosphere, a phenomenon similar to the fallout patterns observed after a nuclear weapons test and Chernobyl, but now sustained by ongoing reactor fires and spent fuel blazes. Public health experts warn that long-term cancer rates will climb worldwide. Every additional becquerel in our food and water increases. By the late 2030s, the world's socio-economic order has largely disintegrated. The combination of climate catastrophe and radioactive contamination fractures the globalized economy. International travel is nearly non-existent because both of infrastructure breakdown and the fear of radiation exposure on long journeys. Trade in food and goods have devolved into ad hoc local barter, since centralized distribution is impossible under constant disaster. Regions that remain habitable from safe zones, relatively less contaminated with tolerable climate, mostly in the far southern hemisphere and a few remote northern areas. For instance, parts of New Zealand, Patagonia, and Siberia, far from any meltdown sites and somewhat buffered by distance, become refugees for those able to relocate. So even so, these areas face their own challenges from extreme weather and inflows of refugees. Humanity's population shrinks precipitously due to famine, conflict, and radiation-related illness. What was roughly 8 billion people in 2020 falls by at least hundreds of millions, or maybe billions, by 2040. Those losses stem not only from immediate disaster casualties, but also from secondary effects: hunger, lack of medical care, and weakened immune systems in a ravaged environment. 2040, the toxic legacy, it settles in. By the 2040s, the frantic pace of new catastrophes slows somewhat, not because the crises are solved, but because so much has already collapsed. Most of the vulnerable nuclear reactors have already broken down by this point, or were preemptively shut. The ones that survived the 2030s are primarily in regions that remain functional enough to manage a safe, cold shutdown, or have newer designs with passive cooling. However, the world now faces the long aftermath of what has happened. The 2040s are a bleak decade of enduring fallout, literal and figurative, where humanity grapples with the toxic legacy of hundreds of reactor failures amid a climate that remains hostile. One grim reality sets in. The radioactive contamination is far from a short-term problem. Many of the isotopes released have half-lives measured in decades or longer, meaning the radiation will persist for generations. For example, cesium-137, half-life about 30 years, and strontium-90, half-life about 29 years, remains abundant in the soils of meltdown zones and downwind regions. These isotopes mimic vital nutrients. Cesium behaves like potassium, strontium like calcium, so they continuously cycle through plants, animals, and water. Crops grown in contaminated soil uptake cesium. Grazing animals concentrate it in their flesh. Humans who consume these foods further concentrate it in their bodies. In the 2040s, scientists, or those that are left, document how radioactivity has infiltrated the global food chain. Traces of cesium-137 show up in grain and milk, even in safe zones, due to minute fallout that has spread worldwide. In harder hit areas, food contamination remains a severe obstacle to resuming agriculture. Even when farmers attempt to cultivate, their produce often exceeds safety limits imposed in the old world. Consequently, hunger continues to stalk populations. Arable land might be available, but not all of it can be used without slowly poisoning those who eat from it. Another challenge is the management of radioactive waste and materials. The reactor meltdowns of fires have dispersed a lot of the radioactive inventory into the environment, but significant amounts still reside in the wreckage of the power plants. Spent fuel rods that did not burn sit in cracked pools or dry casks at sites now too hazardous for people to approach. The reactors themselves hold tons of uranium and plutonium in their ruined cores. In the 2040s, these wreckage sites are largely uncontained. Unlike Chernobyl, where a concrete sarcophagus was built over the destroyed reactor, many 2030s accident sites have been simply abandoned mid-disaster. Some have rubble or sand piled by drones or remote machines to try to smother fires, but no comprehensive containment. That means groundwater leaching becomes a major concern. Rain percolating through the wrecked reactors carries radioactive contaminants into aquifers and rivers. For communities downstream, if any remain, water sources are compromised. In coastal plants, continued leakage of radiation into the ocean is observed. By 2045, marine biologists who are left report increased contamination in sea life, far from any direct fallout, indicating that ocean currents spread the pollutants. Strontium-90, for instance, known to accumulate in fish bones, is found in fish thousands of kilometers from any reactor site. The Pacific Ocean, already contaminated by the Fukushima incident in 2011, now receives orders of magnitudes more radionucleotides from multiple Pacific Rim reactor failures. Ocean fisheries, already stressed by climate-driven acidification and overfishing, are now additionally burdened by radioactive pollution. Many fishing zones are closed due to cesium levels, pushing more coastal communities into protein scarcity. The climate crisis continues unabated in the 2040s, though its character has changed. With industrial civilization greatly diminished by mid-decade, greenhouse gas emissions from human sources have plummeted. Oil consumption is a fraction of what it was, and many coal plants are offline, some destroyed, some simply without supply lines. This initially gives a glimmer of hope that anthropogenic warming might slow. Indeed, by the late 2040s, some climatologists who are left note a slight stabilization in CO2 levels. However, the damage is already done in terms of triggering feedback loops. Warming continues due to inertia and feedback emissions like methane from permafrost. By 2040, the world breached 2C, more likely 3 warming, and by 2050 it may be heading toward 2.5 or quite possibly approaching 4.5, despite the collapse in human emissions. The ongoing extreme weather further complicates the radioactive legacy. For example, wildfires in contaminated forests have become a recurring nightmare. Each summer in the 2040s, large wildfires ignite in areas with dry, hot conditions. Some of those areas include evacuated zones dense with dead trees and dry brush around former reactor sites. When these fires rage through radioactive forests, they loft radionucleotide-laden smoke into the sky. In 2043, a massive fire in the abandoned parts of Eastern Europe, fueled by a drought and heat wave, burned hundreds of thousands of acres, remobilizing cesium and plutonium deposited in the soil. Soot and ash carrying those particles travel far. Monitors as far away as northern Scandinavia register spikes in airborne radiation, if there are any monitors. What was effectively locked in the soil is thus released anew by fire, a horrific feedback where climate-induced fire boosts the spread of nuclear contaminants. Similarly, intense storms cause flooding and dust storms that redistribute radioactive sediments. Rivers that flow through meltdown zones periodically flood and deposit radioactive silt onto downstream plains. The environmental contamination, therefore, is not a static situation. It worsens in pulses whenever climate disasters strike the polluted zones, creating secondary fallout events through the 2040s. Human society in this decade adapts in grudging, hard-scrabble ways. In relatively uncontaminated regions, people develop new habits to minimize radiation exposure. For example, rooftop farming and hydroponics indoors becomes crucial to grow food in controlled environments to avoid contaminated soil. Water is filtered through improvised means, layers of charcoals and resins to trap radioactive isotopes. People often wear personal dosimeters if they can get them. Where are they made? And masks when venturing outside, especially on windy days that can carry dust. The specter of radiation sickness and cancer is a constant part of life. Medical knowledge from past nuclear accidents is applied where possible. For instance, Prussian blue pills, which bind radioactive cesium in the digestive tract, are prized treatments to reduce cesium uptake. Potassium iodide pills are stocked to predose the thyroid in case of new radioactive iodine releases, which means you probably have to take it all the time. However, these medications are in short supply as global production capacity and supply chain infrastructure is decimated. Despite these measures, the health toll is severe. Cases of cancer, thyroid, leukemia, solid tumors skyrocket, and with healthcare systems devastated, many go untreated. There is also a rise in birth defects in regions that were exposed to higher radiation during the 2030s, a tragic echo of what was observed in some areas after Chernobyl, now magnified by a wider scale. Mental health is another casualty. Whole generations grow up under the dual shadow of climate apocalypse and invisible radiation hazard, leading to widespread psychological trauma and eco-radiation anxiety. By the end of the 2040s, some stabilization occurs in the sense that no new major nuclear disasters are unfolding simply because so few reactors remain operational or intact. What remains of organized governments and international institutions focus on containment and mitigation. There are projects, for instance, to entomb certain high-risk reactor sites in concrete, as was done with Chernobyl, now that radiation levels around them have decayed enough to allow any heavy machinery that might be left to approach for short periods. One such international effort in 2048 finally encases the remains of a major U.S. reactor that melted down 15 years prior, using robotic builders to minimize human exposure. Those efforts are slow and cover only the worst offenders, but they at least aim to prevent further leakage. So we get to the 2050s and beyond, a transformed and radioactive world. Earth is a fundamentally altered planet. Human civilization has been gutted. What remains is a patchwork of survivor communities and a few stable enclaves attempting to rebuild among the ruins. The climate is hotter, approaching 2.5 C. Seas are higher and seasons are unreliable. On top of this, the planet's surface carries the wounds of the nuclear collapse. Even as some dangers gradually subside with time, others will persist for centuries. Radioactive decay has slightly improved conditions in the decades since the meltdowns. By 2060, it would have been maybe 20-30 years since the peak of the disaster. Isotopes like iodine-131, which caused acute thyroid exposure in the 2030s, they're long gone. With an 8-day half-life, they decayed away within months of release. The most intense short-term radiation from the accidents, which came from these short-lived fission products, have thus faded. Even some medium-lived isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90 have seen about one half-life pass. Areas that were extremely contaminated by cesium in 2035 might register roughly half of the cesium levels by 2065, simply due to radioactive decay, not counting redistribution. This means that radiation levels in some exclusion zones are lower in 2060 than they were in 2040, potentially allowing limited access with protective gear. In a few zones on the periphery of disasters, radiation has decayed enough that the authorities consider letting people return with precautions, much like parts of Fukushima exclusion zone were gradually reopened after a decade. Wildlife begins to reclaim many regions more fully as human absence continues. In moderately contaminated areas, animals have multiplied, albeit some with shorter lifespans or health effects. The paradox seen in Chernobyl's exclusion zone, where wildlife thrives despite radiation because human pressures are removed, is now playing out on a larger scale. Some scientists in the 2050s cautiously talk of certain abandoned areas becoming de facto wildlife reserves, albeit radioactive ones, and those scientists, they got to be in their 80s. However, other hazards will essentially be permanent on human timescales. One is plutonium. Many reactor explosions and fires spread particles of plutonium-239, an alpha-emitting isotope with a half-life of 24,000 years, into the environment. These particles are extremely dangerous if inhaled or ingested, as they can lodge in the lungs or bones or irradiate tissue for a lifetime. Plutonium is heavy and tends to deposit near accident sites, but the fires and smoke did carry some of it regionally. That means that certain hotspots within, say, a few kilometers of the worst meltdowns will remain lethally radioactive essentially forever, as far as human planning is concerned. Even after cesium decays, these areas will be unsafe to inhabit without serious cleanup. removal of topsoil and all that. Another enduring issue is the spent fuel and waste that remain. By 2070, the fuel assemblies that did not burn up in the fires have cooled radiologically, their short-lived fission products gone, but they are still highly radioactive and contain long-lived isotopes. Ideally, they would be secured in geologic repositories to isolate them from the biosphere. But with the collapse of industrial capacity, most of this waste is simply sitting wherever it was last stored. Some is in dry cask containers that can last a few decades. By the 2070s, these casks may be deteriorating, potentially releasing their contents if not maintained. Thus, the world faces a slow seepage of radionucleotides for centuries. The habitability of the planet is dramatically reduced compared to pre-2030. Large regions are effectively off limits due to radiation, especially parts of mid-latitude North America, Europe, and Asia, where population was once the highest. The tropics, meanwhile, suffer extreme heat and humidity that push human heat tolerance to the limit. Some equatorial zones regularly see wet bulb temperatures above 35 C, unsurvivable without air conditioning. The safe zones by the 2050s are those rare places with a combination of tolerable climate and minimal fallout. These tend to be in the southern hemisphere or isolated islands. Portions of South America, southern cone, and Africa, extreme south or highlands in East Africa, see clusters of survivors who have organized small agrarian societies, carefully selecting crops and livestock that can grow in changed conditions and relatively uncontaminated soils. Australia and New Zealand, which had no nuclear plants of their own and were distant from most fallout, became crucial harborages of technological memory. Harborages. Although Australia's interior is severely hit by heat and drought, its southern coasts remain livable. Antarctica and the Arctic islands, free of radiation but harsh in climate, see some interest as refugees. Some communities attempt to live in dome biomes on the Antarctic Peninsula, leveraging the cooler climate and abundant marine life despite the logistical difficulties. The collapse of industrial emissions has a small silver lining for climate by 2070. Atmospheric CO2 has finally plateaued, possibly even dipped slightly as the oceans and regrowing forests draw down the carbon. But this comes at the cost of global societal collapse and mass mortality. In essence, the Earth system reset itself in part by a brutal reduction of human impact while locking in a radioactive legacy. The climate remains warmer and more volatile than the Holocene average, but without continuous fossil fuel burning, it may avoid worst-case 22nd century projections. Nonetheless, sea levels by 2070 are higher. Many coastal former cities are now tidal marshes littered with ruins, and superstorms still occur, though fewer targets remain to damage. The surviving humans have adapted to a nomadic and subsistence lifestyle in many places, always mindful of avoiding radiation hotspots identified by their Geiger counters. The world population is a fraction of what it was. Industrialized civilization is dead alongside billions of humans, and those who remain are scattered and isolated. Sarah Connor, sign up for Collapse 2050. Holy shit, guys. I did it. I did the whole thing. And now I could probably edit it and make it into, I could make it into different parts. I did it. My throat's still here and you are still here. Wow. That was good. She did a ton of research to do that. And everything was really good. The comment sections at the actual end, where people were talking, I'll just read you one. Let's see. this guy wrote, I'm doing cartwheels. I can hardly contain my excitement over your in-depth coverage of this critically under-discussed topic. So it's that this person says nuclear is the most insane thing humans have ever done or likely ever do. It is our legacy. Wow. Wow. And then some people were putting in just some information, but really good links and talking about different things that were out there and happening. And I mean, these nuclear power plants are out there, you know. I have to read you this one quick comment that this person wrote. Jan Steinman ran a co-op farm Doomstead for 15 years. All right, I got to read what Jan wrote. I can't help it. The surviving humans have adapted, always mindful of avoiding radiation hotspots identified by their Geiger counters. I have one of those. It has a 9-volt battery. Will there still be batteries in 2070? Will Amazon still deliver them to... That's what I was thinking through it too. She's great though. She got so much right. Will Amazon still deliver them to the nomadic subsistence farmers? Will there still be battery factories? Will global supply chains still supply the raw materials? So basically, there were some things, but I thought it was really good. And Sarah Connor gets an applause. Thank you. And she gets, and also she gets this because it was scary. Yeah. All right. So comments and thank you. I saw somebody gave me a super chat. Thank you very much. That was very sweet. I do these for education, but I really had a lot of fun reading. And I told her, I wrote to her and I said I was going to read her piece, and it was long. It was long. So yeah, right. He says, will there be an internet? No, there may be ham radio. So an hour and a half plus 7 minutes show. Lots to cut up. I'm working on a guest for Friday night. I'm hoping it works out. I don't know what's happened. We've kind of lost touch. So stay tuned. I have a lot to do. Thank you, Ernie. You're such a sweetheart. Go to Ernie's channel, Ernie's Cabin. If you want to be happy and you want to look at beauty, go to Ernie's Cabin. Love you all. Put up a mason bee house. Every little bit helps. Love you, Sandy. Thanks for what you do. Well, what do? I talked, we politicized, and then I read. So now I'll have that piece to clip and put it together as a scary story. Really, that could be a movie, couldn't it? Yeah. The dogs of Chernobyl. Some survived, and it's this strange breed, mostly all the same looking. People are studying them. Cool. Yeah, cool. And Bombas saw today nuclear is less CO2 intensive than most things. However, I don't believe it. And 2, it'll never be safe, especially as we all know when society goes belly up, which she just wrote about and I just read about for an hour. Trust the one body of the divine, the universe, the Mother Earth, the grandmother moon, brother sun, all the stars, and all of our stardust relatives. I love you, Gary. I read all of your newsletters. I try. Happy Earth Day. Stephen King's Earth Day. Yes. Aw, Looney always doing the job. He's so wonderful. I actually really enjoyed doing the show. You hear me go. I'm losing my voice. Give her a sub at Collapse 2050. I think she's on, is she on Medium? I think she's on Medium. All right. Gazer and Philip and Bombas and, oh, hun, listen, you can go back. I'm going to cut it up. So over the next few days, I'll be cutting pieces up to make it easier because I'm cheating with some new software, which I really can't afford, but don't tell anybody. It's fun. It's fun. Okay, Alan. I'll cut it up and you'll watch it in pieces because We live in bizarro world. And if you were here in the beginning and you know that we have a president, and I will just briefly say the White House message, I will close with White House Earth Day message praises Trump as president who finally follows climate science or follows science. Okay. Good night, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow on Left Past 10. I got to rest up and do things in the morning. And Poppy, I love you. And Looney and Kim, everybody, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I gotta get the end going. All right, let's hear some upbeat music, huh? Da na 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 da na 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 na. All right. Woo, peace out. I love you guys. Bye.